For my bodice, I'm using Simplicity pattern 2851 that looks like this. These were the original pattern pieces that came with the pattern. Obviously need a little bit of altering. The front section obviously originally comes down to a scoop, which is extremely low. The side sections turned out to be okay. Then obviously the back comes down to a scoop, which needs to be squared off. Square back. Right, I had originally done a first full mock-up from these pattern pieces, and the front one, this is my second cutout. I discovered that the straps needed to be slightly wider. This angle was okay. I've made this a lot longer than it was because I was only practicing, but you can see here the general shape that has been altered. I brought the strap out and then I've added extra fabric so it allows me to cut this shape here. So that's how I went about doing that bit. So it now looks like this compared to the original pattern piece on the left. And this is my new back section, which again has changed considerably from this piece. I've had to bring the shoulder strap out again a little bit this side, not this side where the armhole is. And as you can see, originally it was scooped right down at the back. Well, I redrew it so it's squared off at the top. And also, because of the original pattern for this piece, the back isn't straight, it flares out slightly here because this section here wasn't designed to meet. So obviously I won't be having that, I'm going to have a zip in mine, so I needed a total straight line for the back. And this is only a second mock-up that I've done to get a good fit in. Now, to ensure that you get a good fit in, I highly recommend that you have somebody who knows what they're doing to fit it for you for a good fit. And you always fit a garment inside out. So if it's slightly baggy around the waist or hips, you can, at this stage where you've only got it pinned, you can move the pins in to where it fits you or fits your waist more comfortably, say. And then what I would do is, when I've got my new line, my new seam lines that fit me, is I draw on the pattern pieces where that line is. I then cut the pieces out and they become new pattern pieces again. So I've already done one mock-up. As I say, this is the second mock-up. This is from the pieces that were altered from the first time. So really, some of them I might have had to have brought the waist in a little bit. Some of them might be slightly smaller than the original pattern pieces, but the shape of the side, back and side front are still the same. Okay, for my bodice liner, I'm using a very thin black cotton. I think it's a cotton lawn, but I'm not sure. But it's very thin, very soft. That will be my liner. Next, for my stiffener fabric, which becomes the middle section between your outer fabric and your liner, I'm using this stiff corset couture, which I find works very well for me. You can buy it online and you can get it off eBay. Just search corset couture. This has got a herringbone weave line to it. Okay, next up, what you want to do, you want to take your pattern pieces, and I've got the front section here which was cut on a fold, make it easier, so I didn't want a seam line down the front, so I just folded the fabric and cut it on the fold line. Now, what I'm doing for this particular method is I've cut one section, again on the fold for the front piece, of the thin black cotton liner, and I've cut another piece of black corset couture. I've laid them over the top of each other so that they all match up. I've pinned and tacked the pieces together so they don't move and that they match up perfectly. If I just show you here, you can see the two layers that I've tacked together. You then want to do the same again. This is the side front section, and again I've done exactly the same. Cut one side of corset couture and one of black liner, and I've tacked and pinned them both together so they both layers stay. And then again for the side back and side front, and then you need to reverse the process for your side. So basically you need two of each pattern piece of each fabric. Next, what I want to do is work out where my boning is going to go and what types of boning I'm going to use on each piece. This always daunts me a little bit, where to put it in bodices, which are not the same as corsets. But generally I put one down the front to hold the front straight, but it also depends how much you want to bend and move. So because I want a bit more movement in this, I'm not going to heavily bone it as in my last costume, which was the young Snow White, which was heavily boned to the skies or near enough. So I'm going to just mark out now where my boning channels are going to go. Next, I've been marking my boning channels. To give me enough room, I've started about 4 centimetres up from the bottom and about 2 centimetres in from the top. That's on every single place where I want the boning to be. From there, from where I've marked where it has to come in, I can then mark how long my piece of boning has got to be. Then I went to mark my channels with some chalk, and I've made the channels 1 centimetre wide because my boning is about 7 millimetres wide, so it just gives a bit of extra room to slide it in later on. I'm going to be using spiral boning down the front and on the sides here, spiral boning here, straight boning on the side seams here, and then spiral boning here, here and one straight at the back. What I'm now going to do is sew a sewing line along where I've marked the lines to do my channels. I'm going to leave the ends open so that I'll be able to slide the boning up through the channels later on. Okay, for my bodice I'm using a black cotton velvet here, which I bought from eBay. It is dressmaking cotton velvet in black, brought from Ralston Fabrics, who also have a website under that same name. It's a very nice cotton velvet, very thin, not too heavy, not too chunky. What you don't want is the upholstery velvet because that's too thick and heavy. A few tips when using and cutting velvets is very important. Because of the nature of velvet, if you brush with your hand the pile of the velvet, you can feel one direction is rough and the other direction is smooth. Now generally, as it's running smoother down this way with the grain line, you'll want the smoothness to run down your bodice, not upwards. So this is the next important thing. When you cut out your pieces, except for the front one, which was done on a centre fold, which I did last, you've obviously got to make sure, I'll just take that centre fold out of the way, save confusing you. Right, I advise very strongly using velvet to cut one piece at a time. Usually you'd be okay on basic cotton fabrics to fold your fabric over and cut it so you've got the reverse side of each one. Due to the nature of velvet moving and the way the fibres react, you really only want to cut one piece at a time, and don't put too many pins in it either. And just remember, when you cut your fabric pieces, you've cut one of each one way, you then want to reverse them over to cut one each in the opposite directions. I can't tell you how many times I've got this wrong sometimes. But there we go, that's what you want to do. One piece at a time, and make sure that you've got each piece running with the same grain line.
We're now going to embroider our design onto our front panel. This is just a practice piece to make sure that the design works, and we're quite happy with that. It's not all the right colours, of course, but it is just a practice. But you cannot hoop velvet at all, whether you put it into an embroidery hoop or whether you put it into a machine hoop, because this is what will happen. That ring that's left behind there is called hoop burn, which means that when you put the velvet into the hoop, it crushes the fibres, and you'll be left with the outline of your hoop, which will never come out. Excuse me. So I'm going to show you a method that is called unhooping. The method I'm going to use involves just putting your stabilizer into your hoop and nothing else. The stabilizer I'm using is iron on, tear away stabilizer, which means on one side it has an adhesive backing which glues itself to the fabric once you heat it up. The second method you can use is to use an ordinary stabilizer, and you can buy a spray can of temporary adhesive. So if you were using the ordinary stabilizer, you'd put it into your hoop, make sure it's tight, and then you would spray your temporary adhesive onto your hoop, and then you would put your velvet over the top where you need to position it into your hoop, and then you would press it down until it's nice and firm, and then what you would do is get some Solvay stabilizer. This is soluble, and as soon as you wet it, it disintegrates. So when you've got your fabric on your hoop, you will then place a piece of Solvay on the top, and then you'll put that into your machine and embroider your design. But because I'm using the adhesive stabilizer, what I'm going to do is actually put a warm iron onto the reverse of my hoop, and that will make the glue melt and stick my fabric in my hoop. Right, I don't want to iron directly onto the velvet because I'm going to melt the pile. So what I did is just got a thin piece of cotton, just scrap, placed it over the top, and just put the iron in the middle for a few seconds just to hold the fabric. It is now caught onto the stabilizer. Now I'm going to turn the whole thing over, and I'm using a book here because I want to raise the whole hoop off the table, so that sits quite nicely on my book. And now I can do a proper ironing to bond my stabilizer to the back of the velvet, like so. And when the whole thing now is turned over, it becomes attached to your stabilizer, and that is ready. What I need now is to cut a piece of Solvay and place that on the top of my velvet, and now that is ready to go into my embroidery machine to be embroidered.
For the embroidery on a bodice, I'm going to use Madeira 1988. That's embroidery thread. Green for the leaves. For these little purple dots, Brilldor, purple, I don't think it's got a number, I can't see. Oh, there we go, sorry. PB440 2308.